Today, I'm going to be talking about, does quantum physics explain energy medicine? Fact or fiction? I'm Marci Julin, CEO and founder of Heart and Mind Ministries, Christian author, speaker, and humble servant of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Since the time over a decade ago that I went down that rabbit hole of muscle testing and energy medicine, I have continued to research and study these topics. In today's presentation, I want to address the question, does quantum physics explain energy medicine, fact or fiction? To start us off, let me give you an analogy to consider. Imagine this. You hear a knock on your door, and when you open it, it's me. I'm standing there at your door, but you know that I live across the country from you. So you ask, how did you get here? Well, what are some of the answers that I could possibly offer? By plane? Maybe. Or maybe I drove. I could have taken the bus, maybe even a train. All reasonable answers, right? But what if I said, oh, I just teleported through a wormhole? Now, why wouldn't you believe me? It's because although a handful of physicists have speculated about wormholes, we know that that's not how I showed up at your door. The reasonable explanations are the simple ones: plane, car, bus, train. And in the same way, when people use quantum physics to explain energy medicine, it sounds impressive, but it's just like me claiming I teleported. It borrows words from science to explain something in a way that doesn't actually match up to reality. And today we're going to explore why that is. One of the most common justifications I have heard for practices like muscle testing or energy medicine is this: quantum physics explains it. Perhaps you've read or heard statements like, we're removing quantum blockages, or our therapy is based on the body's quantum biofield. But here's the thing. Of all the times I've heard people say or read online that quantum physics explains energy-based practices, I've never once found an intelligible explanation, let alone someone who had an inkling of what quantum physics actually is. Such claims certainly sound impressive, but it's nonsense. There is no such thing as a measurable quantum biofield. Just using the word quantum doesn't make a claim scientific. So when I began writing my book, Ouija Medicine, The Dark Side of Energy Medicine, I knew that I was going to have to include a chapter addressing this argument. The content of this presentation comes from that book. And I want to say up front, I am not a physicist. So when I began researching quantum mechanics, I knew that I was going to need someone with a PhD to edit my work and make sure that I presented the material accurately. Thankfully, God provided the needed help through Dr. Stephen Gallmer, a physics professor at Cedarville Christian College, who has a doctorate in atmospheric physics. His knowledge and expertise were invaluable. By the way, if you're familiar with my work, you know that I always provide my sources, which I believe is important because anyone can claim anything nowadays. And I want you to know that this was based on scientific research and study, not just on my words or on hearsay. You'll find my sources on the slides during the presentation and even more sources in my book, Ouija Medicine, as well. So today, let's pull back that curtain on this claim that quantum mechanics explains various energy-based practices, such as muscle testing, remote testing, frequency-based devices, and other energy-based modalities. There's a quote from a respected blog author, Harriet Hall, MD, and she's an advocate for healthcare consumer protection. She writes about the propensity for people to misapply quantum science as an explanation for all manner of ideas and practices. She says, pseudoscience and New Age philosophies frequently invoke quantum theory out of context. If there is a God of quantum physics, he ought to smite those who take his name in vain. But quantum theory says strange things can happen. So it provides a convenient excuse for believing ideas that don't make sense to science. Well, thankfully, the God of quantum physics is very patient with mankind. Okay, so let's talk about the foundations of quantum physics or quantum mechanics. The two words can be used interchangeably. In this presentation, I'm going to attempt to give enough of an understanding of quantum physics so that it will be abundantly clear why it cannot possibly explain any energy-based practice. Now, because I'm assuming that those who are listening are primarily lay people and not physicists, I'm going to speak in layman's terms using illustrations that convey meaning but not precision. That's okay, though, because it only takes a basic understanding of our topic to arrive at the answer that we're looking for. Does quantum physics explain energy medicine, muscle testing, remote testing? Now, as I imagine you're aware, I'm going to be explaining some mind-blowing concepts, but I hope to make it as painless as possible while still bringing an accurate understanding of the topic. So let's start at the beginning and go back to where it all began. Max Planck, a German physicist in 1890, was just trying to make a better light bulb. He was hired to do that. And in the process, he discovered something that defied classical physics. He discovered that energy comes in discrete packets or quanta. Quantum has Latin roots and it means how much. Well, he discovered a whole new field of science. Before I go any further, I need to define some terms, though. Let's start with energy. It was classical physicists who first resurrected the long unused Greek word energia. It looks like energy with EIA at the end. Energia from New Testament times. Physicists adapted that original meaning, which, if you're familiar with my teaching on energy in the Bible, the original meaning always refers to spiritual power, whether God's spiritual power or Satan's spiritual power. But physicists adapted that original meaning to refer to an object's potential power, or more specifically, the ability to do work or produce heat, thermal energy. Therefore, when you see physics quotes using the word energy, know that this is not referring to the pagan belief in subtle energies, life force, chi, prana, etc. Additionally, know that when physicists refer to frequency, they refer to scientifically proven frequencies measured in hertz, Hz, which are quite different from the unproven claims that everything from universal energy to the organs of your body, they say those things have specific measurable frequency. That's not what scientists are talking about when they say frequencies. Energy medicine loves to misapply physics terms, so don't be fooled. Okay, so Planck discovered a new law of physics. Light waves produce energy in packets, quanta, with high-frequency light producing large packets of energy and low-frequency light producing small packets of energy. Clear as mud, right? Well, don't give up on me yet. Dr. Don Lincoln, a modern physicist who received his PhD in experimental particle physics, explains the term quantum mechanics in simple terms. And I'll be quoting from him a lot because he's very good at breaking things down into understandable terms. So quantum is the smallest unit of something, And for example, the quantum of the Sahara Desert with its massive sand dunes is a single little grain of sand. He then goes on to explain mechanics is the behavior or motion of something. So quantum mechanics is the motion or behavior and interaction of a collection of individual objects that make up a bigger collection. Okay, so in other words, quantum mechanics simply means studying the behavior of the tiniest building blocks of matter and energy. It deals with the subatomic world of particles like photons and electrons. Nothing mystical, just physics. Okay, so I want to cover 4 basic principles of quantum mechanics in order to answer our question. We're going to look at wave-particle duality, wave function, superposition, and entanglement. And entanglement, of course, is the one that everybody in energy medicine and just in general gets really excited about because it sounds so cool. But you have to understand the first 3 to be able to understand entanglement properly. So bear with me as I explain these scientific concepts. I'm going to begin with wave-particle duality. It's a physics concept that says that sometimes things act like both a wave and a particle at the same time. Think of it this way. If you throw a ball, it moves forward like a particle, but at the same time, as it moves, it's creating a little wave or wake behind. It's similar to what a boat does when a boat moves through the water, but the boat's wake is a lot bigger, so it makes a easier to understand illustration. But there's one major difference between the wake that a ball makes and that of a particle. In the case of the ball's movement, the wake that's created is so small that it's almost imperceptible, which is why we don't really see it when it happens. However, in the subatomic realm, wave-particle duality characterizes electrons to a significant degree, making the concept crucial to understanding and predicting their behavior. Remember, quantum mechanics is all about predicting the movement of subatomic particles. The early understanding of the atom pictured it containing a nucleus surrounded by orbiting electrons, similar to the way we know that planets orbit the sun. Well, these electrons were thought to demonstrate this single circular trajectory for which particles are known, a definite path constantly moving around the nucleus. But physicists now know that as electrons orbit around the nucleus of an atom, they behave as both a particle and a wave at the same time. That's wave-particle duality. Unlike the ball, the wake that they create is huge. It can actually be as big as the atom itself. And unlike a boat creating a wake as it moves through the water, electrons do not move through a physical medium like air or water. Instead, they exist in what is called an electron cloud, which is sort of like an energy field that surrounds the nucleus of an atom. When an electron moves around the nucleus, it does not create waves in a physical medium like a boat does in water. Instead, it creates a wave-like pattern in the electron cloud itself. And this pattern is sometimes called an orbital, and it describes the most likely location where the electron can be found at any given time. Now, I realize that this may be, your mind may be blown at this point. You're like, what in the world is she talking about and why? So bear with me while I lay a groundwork a little bit longer for understanding quantum mechanics, and it will all come together and make sense. So orbitals are mathematical descriptions that represent the probability of the electron's existence in more than one location within a given range at a given time. Electrons can jump from one orbital to another as they gain energy or lose energy, but they cannot be found in between the orbitals. While the electron is not moving through a physical medium like a boat in the water does, it still has wave-like properties that are related to the electron cloud that surrounds the nucleus. These properties help us understand how electrons behave in atoms and how they interact with other particles. And because of that, scientists cannot really measure electrons as particles moving around the atom, but they can figure out where the electron is most likely to be based on their energy and how they move. And that's why quantum science is a science of probabilities, not certainties. So let's talk about wave function. Within orbitals, subatomic particles often behave in strange ways, and that motivates physicists' desire to better understand and predict their location. For the sake of illustration, think of orbitals as boxes within which the electron is guaranteed to be found. There is zero probability that the electron will be outside of that box. It's got to be inside. So after years of brilliant scientists attempting to find a way to mathematically predict wave function, a man named Erwin Schrödinger succeeded in 1926. Perhaps you've heard of Schrödinger's cat. Well, that has no bearing on our discussion today, so I'm not going to talk about it. But this is the guy who came up with it. Based on the nature of electrons, his equation governs the mathematical probability, again, not certainty, probability, of where the electron might be found within an atom. Simply put, the equation provides a tool to graphically plot the most probable location of the electron. We know that a wave in the ocean has a physical presence, and we can measure it. We can see the space and the height and so on of the wave. But with an electron, it's different. It's theoretical. When you plot the probability of an electron's location on a graph, it actually looks like a wave, and that's why they call that the wave function. The regions where the wave peaks or plummets the greatest degree reveals the locations where one will most likely find the electron. Okay, so in case I've lost you in a physics haze, let me offer a simple illustration that's not original to me, but it's very helpful. Let's imagine for a moment that you know a little boy very well. And that little boy is locked in his bedroom with a PlayStation, a desk with homework on it, and a bed. Based on your knowledge of this boy, you can come up with probabilities of where you would find him in the room if you were to unlock and open the door. So let's say he's 80% likely to be at the PlayStation, 19% likely to be in bed, and 1% likely to be at the desk doing his homework. Similar to how you use your knowledge of the boy to predict his location in the bedroom, the Schrödinger equation allows physicists to use what they know about electrons to determine the probability of its location, its wave function. Since the formula has been shown repeatedly to be reliable, physicists generally just keep to the math without testing the accuracy, and for good reason. Or is done still that can test and prove Schrödinger's equation. It's called the double slit experiment. And in this, an electron is beamed towards a plane with two tiny slits or openings so that after passing through one or both gaps in that plane, it then strikes a screen beyond. The classical view of the electron, that it was just a particle and it had to go on a definite path, that view suggested that it would only pass through one or the other slit, kind of like if you were to shoot a ball towards those holes. A tiny ball could only pass through one hole at a time because it's a particle. However, the double slit experiment reveals that the electron actually passes through both slits at the same time, because in the quantum world, electrons behave as both particles and waves. So instead of being like a ball passing through one slit, the electron passes through both, kind of like ripples in water can pass through openings in a barrier. Now, when the electron's wave function goes through both slits, something remarkable happens. It creates an interference pattern on the screen beyond the slits. And this pattern shows a series of light and dark bands, which is not something we would expect if electron behaved only as a particle. The interesting part of this, and this is what we're getting to, the interesting part is that when a detector is placed to observe which slit that particle goes through, the electron goes through, the interference pattern, remember I said after it goes through the slits, there's a pattern of shadows and different lights on the back screen. As soon as scientists try to measure or observe which hole the electron went through, everything collapses. The path of the particle is determined, and its wave-like behavior is ended immediately, and it is limited to only going through one or the other hole. That's really interesting when we apply it, as we're going to in a minute, to other things. The wave no longer interferes with itself once it's been measured or observed. Now think of the measuring in our double slit experiment. Think of it as opening the door to the boy's room. As soon as you open the door, you know precisely where the boy is located. And in the case of quantum physics, as soon as that measurement is taken, the wave function collapses and the particle is limited to one precise location. All quantum mechanical effects of the electron abruptly end, and the particle is at only one location. Now, this reality is crucial, but more on that later. Before discussing the significant implications for energy medicine's claims about quantum mechanics, there are two more key concepts that need explaining, which leads us to the third component, superposition. If we continue to press the boy in the room illustration, we discover a significant breakdown. Whereas the boy can only be in one place in the room at a given time, electrons are in a state of superposition, meaning they can be in all possible locations simultaneously until the measurement is taken. Electrons, therefore, are like the boy being both at his PlayStation, in bed, and at the desk until the moment you open that door. Superposition is the reality that a particle possesses all possible spin positions. Now, I'm going to explain that in just a second. All possible spin positions at the same exact time, and only takes on a single position upon measurement. So you know that you probably know that electrons spin on their axis. They either spin clockwise or counterclockwise. And physicists, for whatever reason, refer to this simply as up or down spin, rather than clockwise and counterclockwise, up or down. One must correctly understands superposition as existing only within the context of the subatomic level. It does not apply to large objects. Increasingly popular multiple universe theories attempt to apply the extremely limited reality of the superposition of subatomic particles to the naturally occurring universe as a whole. And even though this makes for really interesting movies and lively discussions, it does still remain science fiction. Okay, so that's superposition. Let's move on to entanglement. Many misinformed individuals specifically point to entanglement as a scientific explanation for muscle testing and remote energetic testing. For those vaguely familiar with the theory of entanglement, that limited knowledge is a problem. They think that because entangled particles respond instantaneously to one another without a lapse in time necessary for information to travel from one to the other at the speed of light. If that was all you knew about entanglement, then it's understandable that someone might imagine all sorts of ways that entanglement might affect the natural world, including the human body. However, entanglement is not nearly as versatile as people would have you believe. To begin, you need to understand that scientists have only witnessed entanglement in limited scenarios. For example, in radioactive decay. They can also take active steps to entangle two particles. From this chart, you can see what is proven and what is theoretical. Okay, so what is entanglement exactly? Two particles with opposite spin and a single wave function. In other words, with two entangled particles, when one of the two is measured in an up or down position, the other will instantaneously spin in the opposite direction. A simple illustration of this can be seen when flipping a coin. If the coin lands on heads, you know that 100% of the time, what's going to be on the other side? Tails. However, unlike a coin that is one object, particle, we're speaking of two separate particles that behave as though they are one particle. How they do so is a mystery. If scientists measure entangled particle A as up, without fail, particle B will be down. Experiments have demonstrated this repeatedly, no matter how far the distance is between the two particles. Additionally, like a spinning coin that is neither heads nor tails until you catch it, is the spin axis of entangled particles until one is measured. Einstein referred to quantum entanglement as spooky action at a distance. You've probably heard that statement before. And it's a statement that people in energy medicine like to use to say that even Einstein, this great genius, put his stamp of approval on energy medicine. And that's nothing could be farther than the truth. So let me just, because that's such a common misuse of Einstein's phrase, spooky action at a distance, I'm going to go ahead and take a minute to just tell you the background of that. So he said that because somehow the measurement of particle A, forces particle B that's entangled to go in the opposite direction. And so he wasn't suggesting support of some proposed explanations of how quantum entanglement worked. Einstein was being sarcastic. Through sarcasm, he expressed in a letter to a friend his disbelief in some of the ideas their colleagues bantered about. And here's why. Some explanations of entanglement theory at the time seemed to contradict Einstein's proven theory of general relativity, which established that nothing, including information, could travel faster than the speed of light. And yet entanglement theories suggested that particle A knew what particle B was going to do. And that suggested information being transferred. So such a theory hinted at there being some weird outside interference, hence spooky action at a distance, rather than time and space, which governed matter and energy. It turns out that Einstein was both right and wrong. He was right in that information is not being transmitted between the two entangled particles, but he was wrong because somehow the measurement of A does indeed force B in the opposite direction. We don't know how. Okay, so let's talk about why quantum physics. Let's take what we've learned and apply it to our question. Why quantum physics doesn't explain energy medicine? Here's the key problem for energy medicine. Quantum states, superposition, entanglement are incredibly fragile. The instant you measure or interfere with them, those abilities collapse. That's why quantum computers need to be near absolute zero just to function. So let's take what we've learned and separate fact from fiction. Energy medicine proponents and practitioners claim to measure the body's supposed energy fields or health through quantum processes. But in real quantum physics, the moment you measure, all the quantum effects vanish. Their entire explanation self-destructs. Let's consider the claim in light of the truth about quantum mechanics. People say muscle testing measures quantum energy. Well, what's the truth? The truth is that measurement collapses quantum effects, so there's nothing to measure. As previously mentioned, the mere act of observation, physicists, by the way, now prefer the word measurement instead of observation, collapses the wave function and does so permanently. I cannot overemphasize the extreme limitations of superposition and entanglement, so I'm going to repeat myself. Any outside interference with the entangled particles ends their superposition and their entanglement. As Dr. Lincoln writes, creating entanglement in multiple shapes and forms isn't that useful if the connection can't be preserved. Entanglement is notoriously finicky, fading away with even slight external disturbance. The fragile state of entanglement and the end of superposition upon measurement necessitate quantum physics being demonstrated mathematically through probabilities that demonstrate which position the particles will take upon measurement, rather than physically measuring the two particles. Okay, so the important takeaway for us is how this fundamentally disqualifies the claims by energy medicine that quantum mechanics explains their practices. Superposition manifests itself only in the direction of spin. That's it. It can't manifest itself in just, information about your body. It only has to do with two things: the direction that an electron is spinning. Is it counterclockwise or clockwise? It is a one-time, one-direction reality between two entangled subatomic particles, manifested solely in spin direction. Once the entangled particles are interfered with, superposition is lost and the state of entanglement ends. Dr. Lincoln emphasizes the point when he says, no, this does not mean you can use this entanglement to transfer actual information. The collapse of the wave function is still statistical. It cannot transmit a message. So the takeaway is simple. The act of measurement abruptly ends all quantum attributes. Therefore, since muscle testing purports to measure health or energy flow in the body, it would negate the very entanglement that they supposedly need to transmit that information. One cannot observe or measure quantum energy without altering the outcome. To say that muscle testing, remote testing, or treatment of any energetic type can gain information of the health of the body or manipulates one's health through quantum mechanics shows an abysmal lack of knowledge about the basic tenets of quantum physics. So our conclusion is simple. The scientifically proven nature of quantum mechanics fundamentally disqualifies it as an explanation for how muscle testing works. But what about remote testing? You might have heard statements that the entanglement of DNA has been proven. This is false. It's theorized but that is not the same as proven. But DNA is stated as fact, but DNA that's entangled, they will state that it's a fact. And those by energy medicine like to use that as an explanation for how it is that you can treat one small part and affect the entire whole. Because of entanglement, anything containing DNA, they say, is connected by entanglement to the entire body. And therefore, they say that what you do in one part can automatically be transferred to the whole, no matter the distance. So, for example, they say that one can test and treat a fingernail, a drop of blood, or saliva, and put that into a device, or a remote muscle tester can use it. And because of the DNA, they say that it's entangled to the entire person. And therefore, what you do to that little piece affects the entire person through entanglement. And many will even make the giant leap from that claim that, and, of course, why not? It's all science fiction anyway. They'll say that just thinking about the individual allows the remote tester to entangle their energy with that of the one they're testing or treating. And this is just ludicrous. Now, besides the fact that DNA hasn't been proven to be entangled, there are so many problems with these claims. So even if someday they prove, yes, DNA is entangled, there's still so many problems that there's no way that will alter the conclusions about energy medicine's ability to be explained by entanglement. So entanglement only occurs on the subatomic level between particles. Science has not proven this in large systems such as the human body. So the idea that one piece of DNA is entangled with the entire human body is ludicrous. Entanglement cannot transmit usable information, nor can it transmit anything multiple times in both directions. This point isn't up for debate. Entanglement only deals with the spin direction of electrons, up or down, A or B. Nothing else is transmitted, and certainly not back and forth. So even if DNA is someday proven to be entangled, the law of relativity guarantees that entanglement cannot transmit information. Furthermore, any outside interference abruptly ends all quantum attributes that previously existed. And that presents an insurmountable problem for a machine or a practitioner with the intention of testing or treating using quantum mechanics. So in conclusion, I just want to leave you with a scripture and call you to discernment. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, test everything, hold fast to what is good. Quantum physics is fascinating and mysterious. Our Creator is awesome, and His ability to create infinite complexity is amazing. But mystery is not a blank check for pseudoscience. The God who created quantum mechanics gave us a mind to discern truth. So when someone says, quantum physics explains this practice, you must ask, does the science really back this up? The answer in the case of energy-based practices is a firm no. And as followers of Christ, we're called to reject deception and walk in truth.
Energy. They say it's in us and all around us. Energy medicine teaches that illness occurs when the flow of energy is blocked. Practices like muscle testing, homeopathy, acupuncture, and so many others claim to diagnose and treat illness. Has your journey led you to energy medicine? Lots of people claim it really works. They say things like, the body knows, we only have to ask it, or quantum mechanics somehow explains it. But what if there's more to it? A spiritual power that should not be messed with. Think of it like this. Suppose you're standing outside a house one night and all of the blinds are closed. Suddenly, you see a light turn on in a room, but later it turns off and another turns on. You have clear evidence that something is going on in the house, but you have no idea of the motive governing why the lights are changing or who is turning them on and off. Imagine that the human body is like the house, and evidence for energy medicine is like the lights turning on and off. You know there is real power, but that does not mean the intelligence behind the power is good. There could be a serial killer in the house. Isn't it time you question the narrative?